And we're on the air. How you doing, Ron?
I'm very good. How are you, Aaron?
Good. Are you able to introduce yourself to our viewers, please?
Well, I'm Ron Mark, a New Zealand first candidate for the Wairarapa.
Excellent. So tell me, I remember last time we spoke, this was after the election in 2014, and you told me, this is when I was working for the Times Age, that one of your goals was to keep the Wairarapa MP, this is in your capacity as List MP, one of your roles was to keep that Mr Scott as a Wairarapa MP honest. Do you think you've done that?
Well, I think what we've been able to do is demonstrate that he's not been very effective. And I think it's fair to say that Mr Scott has done the job the way in which he believes it should be done. I've done my job. I've provided people with a clear comparison in terms of what I think an effective MP does. And I think what we've done is left people with two pictures that they can make a judgment call on. And I'd like to think that they think I've worked hard. And bearing in mind that I'm a List MP, I don't have the mandate to represent the Wairarapa. But that said, we've set up an office with the support and the approval of the party. We have looked after people who've come to that office with problems. We've had some successes, and we've had those days where we've just been severely disappointed we couldn't get government ministers or government departments to help our constituents. But you know, when you're not in government and you're opposition, you take every win that you can get, and we've had some good wins for some people.
Oh, absolutely. Are you just able to shuffle forward a little bit, maybe?
Yep.
Go, just speak up as much as you can. Good on you. So what are some of the successes that you've had sort of as List MP?
The big ones, a couple. You know, there's big ones been around insulated homes, like when they ran out of money for the Healthy Homes project, and you know, we worked very closely with Lynn Tankersley, and we were just unable to get that support because the Wairarapa had run out. And the funny thing here was we had people who had been to see the constituency MP for help and had been told that there was no help to be had. He couldn't do anything for them. They came. That's a bit of a daunting task when you're an opposition MP and a List MP and you've been told that these people can't get help. But you know, when you've been in Parliament a while, the one thing you hope for is that you've developed a degree of respect amongst your political opponents, and you hope that the work you do is viewed by ministers in government who are your political opponents as being good work, that they respect you, and that when you pick up the phone and you ring them, one, they will take your call, and two, they will deal with it themselves, not hand it on to some official, and three, that they will actually listen to you and take action. And getting them to take action is always a challenge, but if you've got that respect, then you get that. And I've had that with the Healthy Homes thing. A quick phone call to Simon Bridges, who did take my call, did listen to me, and then gave me assurance that he'd put the CEO of ECA onto the phone, and we would get some action. We did. And so we've been able to help people get their homes insulated, to cater for some health issues they had, and we've been able to get funding into the Wairarapa consistently since then. Other things, we had a young couple who were trying to buy a first home, had some problems with the KiwiSaver first home start program, and we couldn't get a change in policy because it requires legislation, but what we got is an assurance from the Minister that that's a gap, that people who apply for that kickstart from that deposit from out of their KiwiSaver account, who then have to set a settlement date, and who get caught in that horrible crossover when the settlement date's due but the actual funding hasn't come through, and then they settle and then suddenly they become ineligible for that first home buyer support, and they drop off and they don't get it. So what I have now is assurance from the current Minister that that's something that we can tidy up under a statutes amendment. There have been a few others, but they're two good examples I feel very good about. Yeah.
Excellent. You obviously contested the seat in 2014. what's different this time? What are you sort of doing differently?
Oh, look, the whole scenario this time round has changed quite considerably, and I guess looking at it, there's a number of things. Firstly, we don't have the issue of the .com party, the Mana party, the Māori party, that horrible coalition possibility that scared the heck out of a lot of people who weren't necessarily happy with the National Party, weren't happy with the national government, but they feared that coalition with Labour more than anything, and so they stayed home and they stayed firm. That doesn't exist anymore. That fear isn't there. The Conservatives were very strong. Conservatives don't feature anymore. They sucked up, quite a few votes out of here.
Oh, for real?
And I mean, the classic example was up in Napier. They pulled 7,000 votes. Well, Stuart Nash won that seat with about a 1,500 majority. Down here in the Wairarapa, they took a few thousand votes as well. They're not in the picture anymore. I think Alistair Scott himself was viewed by a lot of National Party people with a degree of scepticism, but being loyal National Party people, they went with the choice and they supported him. I think they've seen the work of their national MP, and I think there's a large number of them resent the fact that he chose not to move here, not to live here. So, they're just probably 3 or 4 things that make a change. I think the other one that I had to deal with, I had a lot of people telling me, Ron, we love you as the mayor and we're not going to vote for you because we want you to stay as the mayor.
Okay.
And that was like a bittersweet pill, and people were very honest about that with me. They said, well, we don't want you to go to Parliament, actually, so if you don't get in, that's good for us. You stay on as the mayor of Carterton. And well, I'm not the mayor of Carterton anymore,
no.
And I am back in Parliament, and so now the choice is, do you want me to represent you and represent the Wairarapa? And if you do, I need your support, and I need you to vote for me and give me that chance.
Absolutely. It's been said that this election is currently a 2-horse race between Mr. Scott and Mr. McAnulty.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
I think Kieran's been naughty on a number of fronts, and that's one.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
And he needs to be... I think publishing a survey that was done by 2 young Labour people, one who had been on the executive of the Young Labour movement, the other who was a known Young Labour activist, who had been reported on in the media before for running surveys that were dodgy. Publishing that as some sort of credible poll without an RSS, without the scientific methodology being exposed, is naughty of Kieran. But I understand his tactics, and it's interesting that the guys at Premier Beehive just told me that he was in there telling them, don't vote for Ron, he's going to get in anyway, you need to vote for me, I need that help. Look, I could play the Maori card and say, vote for me because I'm brown face, but I'd rather he just competes fairly and squarely and openly. This is a 3-horse race between National, Labour and New Zealand First, and right now I couldn't call it. Part of me likes it that way because it's a fair race, but playing dirty little games and publishing Labour Party surveys that have been gerrymandered. And
where was that published from?
Well, he got it published in the Times Age, but
okay.
The Times Age, in fairness, said it was a Labour Party survey.
Right.
Whether people picked up on it, but having him running around telling people that it's a credible scientific survey is untruthful, and it's actually not becoming him.
And this said that it was a 2-horse race.
Yeah, and that it says a 2-horse race,
Oh,
and Ron's a distant third, so don't vote for him. It's a wasted vote.
Gotcha.
People actually that I've spoken to are disappointed with Kieran.
Okay.
They actually expected better of him, but maybe they're just seeing Kieran.
I see. There you go.
Maybe. Politics does funny things to people when they have high ambitions and all they've ever wanted to do is be an MP. And and I understand that. If you spent good money, gone to a university, studied political science, and your long-term goal in your life was just to be an MP, I can understand you might get desperate. But I never actually set out wanting to be an MP as a young man. I was too busy in a uniform soldiering.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, what do you really envision for the Wairarapa this time around? If you were to be elected? MP? What are your priorities?
One, I want to give it quality representation and to give it a strong voice in Parliament and an experienced voice and someone who actually has a bit of clout in the House. And that's what I believe I offer. 5 terms in Parliament, twice elected mayor, experience as a chief executive officer, experience running large entities, CEO of Federation of Mining Authorities, and 20 years in agribiz. I bring all that experience. I'm a bit of a manic recycler, so I have a very strong environmental twist about me. And but overall, what I want to see is a healthy, happy, prosperous Wairarapa. And for that to be the case, we need to focus on the economics. We need to ensure that the Wairarapa gets its share of the allocated government spend. And we need to change a few policies to ensure that rural provincial New Zealand as a whole gets its share. All I'm hearing, all we've heard from the National Party over the last 9 years, in fact more than that, 12 years, is a heavy focus on Auckland and metropolitan New Zealand. And I get that, because that's where all the votes are. That's what gives them the tillers of power.
The population,
Now all we're hearing out of Labour is the same rant, and we view their condescending sort of attitude towards rural New Zealand as nothing more than that. It's words, it's platitudes. They are focused on social agenda items. They are focused on metropolitan Auckland, metropolitan New Zealand, Metro New Zealanders, and we in the Wairarapa will not be served well by either National or Labour. It's time that we took our own future in our own hands and did something quite shocking, actually. Put a New Zealand First MP in to call the shots.
How can you, as a New Zealand First MP, what will you do to advocate for our rural sector, for our farmers?
Oh, because there's so much that I was doing while I was the mayor, which we just carry on. You promote it positively. You promote the strengths of the Wairarapa. And, you fight for, and we've made it very clear in our policies that we want royalties from return back to the provinces where resources are extracted out of the provinces, and it doesn't matter whether that's oil, whether that's gas, whether that's gravel, whether that's water, that a levy comes back to the province from which those resources were extracted. That's never been the case in all the years that between them National and Labour have ruled this country. They've never ever sought to compensate provincial New Zealand. They've never thought, while they've been spending hundreds of millions of dollars promoting New Zealand as a tourist destination, clean, green New Zealand, come visit the Wairarapa, come out and visit, take in the beautiful, breathtaking scenery. They've never thought about the consequences of that increased visitor numbers on our infrastructure. And there are parts of New Zealand where small communities have been left to pick up the infrastructure development tab to meet with a burgeoning tourist industry and to mitigate the environmental impact that those increased numbers are having on our native bush and on our parks. And so New Zealand First has said, we'll flip the GST back to the provinces to make sure that whatever the tourists spend, and it's easy to pick up on credit cards, Destination Wairarapa has been doing that for years, and I've seen those numbers as the Mayor of Carterton from Destination Wairarapa. We know precisely how much tourists, out-of-towners, are spending in the Wairarapa on their credit cards, and we know precisely how much the GST is. And for the government to take that and not return something back to the provinces is unacceptable in this day and age where we're staring down the barrel of quite some severe infrastructure deficits. We need to be pulling back on the cuts that the government made to rural funding on funding assistance for rural roads. Carterton, when Carterton stood to lose $250,000 in government funding for rural roads, that equated to a 3% increase in rates.
Okay.
Now, it wasn't just Carterton. It was Tararua, it was South Wairarapa, it was Masterton, and the heaviest component of our rates that we pay is not just slapped on you because the councils feel like they want to take a lot more money. It's slapped on you because the councils have to maintain a vast rural infrastructure, a roading infrastructure. When you then get the double whammy from this government of the one road network, which classifies roads as 1, 2 or 3, well, we know where all the third-class roads are going to be. We know where all the second-class roads are going to be. And so we know where the cuts are going to be, and we know who's going to get the benefits of that, and that will be metropolitan New Zealand, over and over and over again. The definitions of redefining roads of national significance is something we have to do. Because, you know, it's taken an election to get the government to finally recognise that the Gorge is a road of not just of national significance, it's a road of economic significance to the whole of the nation. It joins the logistic hub that's been created and built over the last 25 years in Palmerston North. And now suddenly that's thrown into disarray. It has caused mayhem in terms of our ambulance services, and with the disconnecting of Manawatu from Tararua and the DHB service that's been provided. So I have to get some strong focus on that rural road funding. I have to deliver on that. We look at the rail system. You know, how many years have mayors been going cap in hand begging one regional council to upgrade our line, and to the government to throw some money into that? Now, with the growth that we've generated, and a lot of that's been the good work of the councils, the growth we've generated in the Wairarapa, our train service is now stretched. We now have a poor quality commuter service. We now have we are in desperate need of upgrading, of having the lines upgraded, desperate need of having better, that's a little better, isn't it?
That's better.
We're in desperate need of having the engines upgraded, and more carriages on. You know, we do these things, the Wairarapa will take off again. The airport closure. You know, how the hell the government sits there, being a major shareholder in our national airline, and just turns a Nelson's eye while an airline shuts down provincial airports. Why? Because it wants to discontinue that type of aircraft and it doesn't want to introduce a replacement. That should not be allowed to happen. And the government should lay down its policies and its priorities and provide that funding. As the Mayor of Carterton, I got my council to put its hand up to throw some money in to extend the runway so we could get a different aircraft type flying in with Chatham Air. It was unfortunate that, you know, Masterton made the decision it made and we lost that opportunity. But hey, all's not lost. What is unacceptable is the delay. Rail funding to get our commuter service up to speed. And, you know, ideally, we should be able to, ideally, one of our long-term goals should be able to get people into Wellington on a regular, more frequent rail service, a better quality of rail service in under an hour. That's what we should be aiming at. We need the airline up and running again with that connection to Auckland. We do that, we then open up the possibility for corporates, even government departments, to look at relocating into the Wairarapa, where they have better quality of life, where they have high quality schools, where they have top quality services, so long as we can stop the government centralising services in Wellington. We then give them a better location, less capital outlay in terms of their buildings, cheaper operating costs. We need to focus on electricity, and we need to find ways to get those charges down as well. But there's no shortage of work for a competent, energetic, enthusiastic, loyal, dedicated MP. Let me assure you of that. So, road, rail, connectivity. Oh, my God.
Tell us about connectivity.
Oh, you know, it is so frustrating, and it's been going on for so long, and despite all the hoopla about the Rural Broadband Initiative and how it's been rolled out.
Oh, yes.
To learn yesterday that the fibre optic cable goes straight by Cabernet Foods, Kintyres, and they can't connect into it. And they are trying to run a high quality, top of the line software package that enables their buyers internationally to go in through their software and see exactly where their meat that they purchased, be that in Auckland or be that in London, was grown, where it was butchered, what date. You know, to hear that this wonderful broadband initiative isn't providing them with the connectivity despite the fact that the wire goes under their gate is ridiculous. But it does epitomise what this government's done. Look, this government's focus has been on metropolitan and urban, and urban. It's not focused on farming, the farming community. It's not focused on the rural community. And that is why it's disconnected. That's why Pongaroa can't get cell phone coverage. That's why Flat Point can't get cell phone coverage. That's why Parongaho can't get cell phone coverage. You go to any of those small communities out there throughout Tararua, you know, people are struggling. And in a time and age when farmers know that they need to use technology, use science smarter to control their nutrient balance sheets, to run virtual fencing operations, to minimise their footprint, their impact on the environment. Not giving them that connectivity is actually, you know, it's handicapping them, limiting them. And then when you beat them up over the head and tell them you're going to tax them higher, I just think that's just outrageous.
So if you were to be Wairarapa MP, you would basically advocate for all of these improved services?
I'm a fighter. You know, I didn't get to where I've gotten in my life as a foster kid growing up, being shuttled around from one family to the other, and achieve the things that I did in the military, in the Middle East, in business, representing other people as a lead negotiator for a major treaty settlement. What I and others turned into a major treaty settlement. I didn't get these things by sitting there and being mealy-mouthed and being quiet and not taking people to task. We didn't get Carterton up in the scale where it was the fastest growing district in the North Island in my time as the mayor, and third in the nation. And now it's been eclipsed by South Wairarapa. Good old South Wairarapa, good on them.
Yeah.
But we didn't get there by sitting there wringing my hands and be nice to everybody who was shafting us. No, it's, you know, I will present strong cases. I will bring in the people within the community who are being affected and let their voice be heard. And I'll make sure they're heard at the cabinet table. And if I have to, bang heads, well, look at my track record. You know, if I am representing people, they get my 150% loyalty and commitment to them. That's it.
One issue on which I believe that we can't be mealy-mouthed is on mental health and suicide here in our region. As you will know, there have been 606 suicides in New Zealand over the last year. In Wairarapa, we have the highest rate of suicide per head of population. If you were to be MP, Ron, what would you do personally to advocate for our mental health system and for people who are struggling? What would you do?
You know, you judge people not on what they say, but what they do. You know, and I am the guy, and I've long, as people probably don't know, but I held the mental health portfolio for a time in New Zealand First, going back a bit. And why was that? Because when I was with the Labour Party, I did not agree with their wholehearted deinstitutionalisation model that they adopted from the United Kingdom. I had a conversation with Mike Moore back in those days, and I said, I'm worried about it because all the evidence says that we're following a model that's 3 to 5 years old at that stage, and already the signs in Britain are that Jim Anderton, credit where it's due, Jim Anderton's right. Care in the community becomes careless in the community, and without adequate supervision of private providers, you have no indication at all as to whether people are on their medication, off their medication, getting the support, whether caregivers are getting respite care of the level and the quality they should be. These issues and these concerns were raised a long time ago. I was told by Mike Moore, go and talk to Helen. If she agrees, we'll change the policy. Helen wouldn't even talk about it.
Okay.
And, you know, so we fought about that. Right at that time, the debate was going on about Templeton and the closure of Templeton. Now, we had parents who had some very fragile family in that psychopedic unit, right? They wanted a sheltered village built. National got elected attacking the Labour deinstitutionalisation model and corporatisation and privatisation of healthcare services, mental health services, saying that they would keep Templeton open or they would support the building of a sheltered village, modern sheltered village. As soon as National got into government, they backpedalled and they changed their mind and they led the charge on the closure. Totally betrayed the parents of those residents. I fought against that. When I joined New Zealand First, we put it on the coalition table. We built Brackenridge, which is the sheltered village for those psychopathic patients, residents. And it still exists today, and it's still doing everything that both National and Labour said it would never do. And it's doing it brilliantly, and I still, whenever I go down to Christchurch, have families from those residents thanking us for doing that. So, judge people not on what they say they're going to do, judge them what they do, and that's my track record. In terms of mental health, we said a long time ago in New Zealand First, mental health funding needs to be ring-fenced. That happened under the coalition between National and New Zealand First, but that's since changed. Mental health funding in itself is not adequate. The rural funding models for the DHB is fundamentally flawed. The time and distance factors that we have to deal with in provincial New Zealand have been overlooked, misunderstood, under-registered in people's minds, and that has got to change. You cannot expect PHOs to deliver if the DHBs are underfunded, and that fundamentally is our problem. Now, I've served on the Wairarapa DHB. I've served on the Hutt Valley DHB. I worked with Capital and Coast DHB on the 3HD project that Bob Francis, actually, in his time as the chairman, started off. We know we've got funding issues in there. We know I've got quality of service issue. We know that youth mental health services are so underfunded that the first responders these days are the police. That is unacceptable. My son's a cop. He's sick and tired, along with him and his mates, having to pick up the pieces and not being able to get a response from a PHO for a young person who's been either found comatose, drunk, having attempted a suicide attempt, or is just beside themselves and causing all sorts of mayhem. They deal with that. Frontline police are dealing with this every day, and frontline police were never intended to be first responders to mental health issues. And that's only got worse under this government. And it's got to change. And so, I know those issues, and I will be a very strong advocate. But hey, if I'm a party MP and a list MP, I can't do any of those things. I'm a party MP at that point. I can't work for the Wairarapa unless I am the constituency MP who's been given the mandate of the people to represent them. And that's what's got to happen this time. Playing Bill and Ben between the two flower pot men, red and blue, there's nothing new. Give me a shot. Give me 3 years. Give me 3 years. And if I am not good at this job, if I don't deliver, boot me out.
Sort of as far as sort of building, having institutions, I guess, or the secure villages, of hospitals, specifically targeting people with mental health issues. I know a lot of them closed.
Yeah.
I think there was horrific abuses that were happening in these systems. How can we how can we ensure that something like that won't happen again?
We were always warned not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Everyone knew that some of those old facilities needed a bulldozer right through them. Everyone knew that. They needed to be modern. They needed to be, healthy places. There were staff issues, and everyone knows that. And those things are still being played out today. And we understand better. We had people who were autistic who were locked up. We had young people who were classified as juvenile delinquents who were locked up. We had people who were Asperger's wasn't understood. Even kids with dyslexia, because their behavioural issues were put away. Look, in the 1990s, we had a far better understanding of that, and we could have made those changes. We have medicines, drugs that are available today that weren't available back in those days when those institutions were built and when people were given all sorts of horrendous stuff like shock treatment and God knows what. We'd moved way beyond that. We needed to recognise that and pick that halfway house between that. Bulldoze some institutions. Build some secure places where people could be safe, because it wasn't just about keeping the wider community safe from these people with issues. it was actually also keeping those people safe from our wider community. Because some of those damn rat bags out in there, and I can tell you this from being a businessman in Christchurch and doing a degree of social work that I did down in Christchurch at that time, we learned very quickly to identify those people who were being cared for in our community, who were being preyed on by supposedly normal people, people who were nothing but low life, who, and a friend of mine, his sister, was taken in and became pregnant because people took total advantage of her. She didn't have the wraparound support and security that she deserved. Well, yes, she was in the community, living a normal life, subject to the predatory behaviour of other people out there. And then we had others who would, people knew when the money was in their bank account and would befriend them and withdraw all of their money in the first few hours of them getting it. And we just put these people out in the community. We had people with behavioural issues that ended up being locked up and put in prison. And look at the prison stats today. Look at the number of people who were simply transferred out of institutions straight into jails because they're out in the community without the support, without the backup, and then they commit crimes because they do the sorts of things they do, and they do it again and do it again, next thing they're in jail. Yeah. Is that better for them? No, it wasn't. It was never going to be better for them. And this blind, it's like we see so many times from both National and Labour, blind adherence to ideology that is fundamentally, it's either politically correct ideology which is flawed, or it's just blind social ideology which is flawed and has no connection with common sense. And that was one classic example. All we're saying in New Zealand First is that, for ordinary people, have a look at what's happened in this country over the last 30, 40 years. The one thing that's consistent is that one day you have National, another day you have Labour. One lot opposes what the other's doing in government, and when they become the government, they do the same damn thing. And it doesn't matter whether you look at mental health, look at the economic reforms, look at incarceration rates. People say that National has managed the prisons appallingly bad. Well, so too did Labour. Labour's track record is one of running an out-of-control emergency response unit that became known infamously as the Goon Squad. It took me 4 years to bring them to account, but we did, through a judicial inquiry. And Labour denied. Now I sit there in the House and watch Labour attacking National on fight clubs and everything. Well, hell, you guys, it's this pot calling the kettle black here. And by the way, when you're in charge, it won't be any different. Your home detention rates, the type of people you were putting on home detention, who were wife beaters, who had people who had been in prison for grievous bodily harm, releasing people from home detention to go and live with someone with mental health issues, who then got abused by that inmate. Now, that was under Labour's watch. If people,
so what can NZ First do?
If people want good quality insurance, political insurance, they better party vote New Zealand First, because that's the party that it doesn't matter whether it's red or blue. There's nothing new. We will hold them to account. We will restrain their excesses, and that is where the value in the New Zealand First Party vote lies.
Does New Zealand First have that policy on sort of improving incarceration rates? What will you do that's different?
Oh, look, we always advocated, and it's funny, I am the only guy, I think, who's in Parliament right now, who took part in a cross-party conversation about how to rehabilitate effectively, how to more effectively rehabilitate, accepting a couple of things, right? There are people who will not change their ways. They need to be incarcerated. And so we know that some find religion, they change. Some find a good partner, they change. Some find a very good employer, they change. Some find, there was a fourth one, some unfortunately pass away. Or they have that revelation themselves that they are not going to live this life anymore. They're probably getting too old, too slow, and they can't hack it with the young bucks anymore, and they decide, I'm out of there. To make people change, or to encourage them to change, you've got to change the whole way in which the corrections assessments are done. You've got to focus on whole of health. You've got to focus on things like hearing, eyesight, dyslexia. You've got to actually do an IQ test. You've got to actually do those aptitude tests and dexterity tests. You've got to do the education assessments, and you've got to provide the prisons and program that allow a person to educate their way out of their lifestyle. And if you don't do that, you're just going to put them in that concrete mixer and churn around and pop them back in again. And it'll only be when they get too old, too slow, that they actually decide to change their way, and that's too late. Yeah. And there's too many victims down the line. It's a holistic approach to rehabilitation, as opposed to this penny pocketing way in which both National and Labor have done it. Labor's track record's there. 9 years of them in government. Where did it go? Nowhere. National's track record's there. 9 years, they gave up on their rehabilitation targets, admitting they couldn't achieve it. Well, you won't achieve it unless you address rehabilitation in a holistic manner. Drug and alcohol assessments are the first thing. Education, education, education.
Ron, you're a ward of the state.
Yeah.
As you know, there has been a lot of push for the government to launch an inquiry into the abuse of state wards between the 50s and the 80s. There was several petitions that have been put to Parliament for the government to basically not only launch a formal apology, but to actually launch an inquiry so that such abuses won't happen again. Are you supportive of that?
Well, New Zealand First has made it very clear we do support an inquiry. We've never resiled from that. We've been very clear. Derek Paul is our social welfare spokesperson, and he's been out in the media countless times saying, yes, we support such an inquiry. Look, as a ward of a state, there's things I know, and there's, I have nothing but praise for the 6 sets of parents that looked after me over my time, from the time that I was 3 to the time I was 16. And my 7th set of parents was the New Zealand Army, because I was formally put into their custody as a ward of the state. There are good times, there are bad times, there are good placements, and generally overall, when I look back, and I had one of those be careful what you wish for moments, which one of my foster mothers, Betty Field, told me one day when I was lamenting how much better some other kids had it than me. And she always said, you never know what happens behind closed doors, Ron. Be careful what you wish for. One day you just might get it. And I had one of those when I finally got home to see my father in Cannons Creek, Porirua. I, over time, came to realise that as much as I yearned and pined to be with my own parents, I came to realise a couple of things. One, if my whanaunga had wanted to raise me, they would have. My extended whanaunga. They would have, but they didn't. The people who took me in were complete strangers, and they did their level best. I was not the most easy child to parent, but then foster children aren't. We come with a lot of damage and baggage. And so we put a severe pressure on. That's why I do work for foster parents, privately, quietly, in my own way, and foster kids. That's my way of putting back. But there were things, and I won't go into detail, but my siblings went through different pathways, some of them, and I know that there were homes that didn't provide the same level of care that my foster parents did. And so Derek's right. Where the state accepts responsibility and takes a child, and the state fully accepts the responsibility for the well-being of that child.
Absolutely.
At all times. And the state needs to own that.
Yeah. On sort of another sort of social issue, like the Wairarapa here has always sort of been traditionally a low-income area, traditionally a low-wage economy. What will you do if you were to be elected MP to support those on a low wage, to advocate for them? Because and then many of the people who are aged care workers, who work in a hospo, who work behind bars, in fast food, that sort of thing, street cleaners, what will you do to support those people?
It's not just in the Wairarapa. One of the things, and I gave a speech in the House, and I know it shocked a few people, and it was interesting that Grant Robertson then nicked a piece of my speech and repeated it virtually word for word in the House again a few weeks later. We have people who come and clean our offices in Parliament. Their wages are appalling. They're working at 3 o'clock in the morning. I know, because sometimes I'm still there. And they come and they clean around me, and they ask me, is it okay? And so if I'm still at my desk at 2 o'clock in the morning, and these people are coming in. I'm very mindful, one, of their age, two, you know which part of town they come from, and you know they're not being paid particularly well. So we've had that conversation many times in our caucus. But hey, look at our track record. New Zealand First was the party that supported the increases in the minimum wage. We drove some of that. I drove through 4 pay rises for the Defence Force when Helen Clark became the Prime Minister, and she accepted my arguments, and Mark Burton implemented them. We've consistently said we want to raise the minimum age, and we're saying up to $20 an hour. But there's got to be a bit of both in that, because when the minimum wage gets to a level where some people find it, when benefits and assistance get to a level where some people find it more attractive to not work, then a state has to have a look at those things and find ways to incentivise people to take up work and take up jobs. So we'll do it both ways. It was New Zealand First that brought in the work for the dole scheme. And it actually, in that time, all it required people to do was do some community service, you know. So we have, Winston has said, and what can I do other than say we'll implement that if we're in government, a minimum wage of $20 an hour, but there's nothing for nothing. That means employers have to be supported. That means employers have to have a tax cut, a tax break, some subsidy, some assistance to be able to do that. And, you know, when I go over the east side, I look at the state of those houses over there, and I look at the rent increase they've just had, and then I go onto the Infometrics website and have a look at what the average wage is over there. It isn't a pretty sight. And I don't think, to be honest, I don't see how some MPs can sleep at night supporting the sorts of an economy that has people living in those conditions. And, you know, National's not the only one that's been guilty of that in the past. Labor's got its own demons that it needs to exercise as well.
Sort of about the welfare system. Like the welfare system, it can be extremely punitive if you're trying to, you know, if you're trying to find work and you work a certain amount of hours, your benefit will be cut.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, like, what can we sort of do to ensure that people who do use the welfare system are protected and do have a fair go?
You know, there's a degree of rigidity that I find I'm uncomfortable with, because in my electorate office we have all numbers of problems, you know, manner of problems brought to us, and we get elderly people saying that, you know, they're limited on the number of hours that they can work, and it becomes a disincentive to take up some work. You know, it's a bit of a mixed message when governments say on one hand, oh, we want to raise the qualifying age of superannuation out to 67 or whatever, and when you've got, and the people should work longer. But then at the same token, you're actually punishing people for actually working longer and getting longer hours. I think that there's and then we haven't even mentioned the secondary tax issue where people are forced to take 2 jobs. So yeah. There are some measures in place which were actually brought in by Labor, which were designed by Steve Mahari and Helen Clark to incentivise people into work. Those measures have been pretty much carried on by National. National would advocate that, they would argue that they've increased the benefit first time in 40 years. Well, the truth is it wasn't made available to everybody, so it wasn't universal in the way they said. I think what we need to have is a degree of flexibility so that if people do earn a little bit more, and I'm thinking of a case I've got on my desk right now of a gentleman who's been reassessed on a projection of 6 months of earning based on 1 week. And his benefit has been turned off because the projection for 6 months is on that 1 week is that he's above the line. Well, he's actually not. That was an unexceptional peak, and I think that sort of bureaucratic nonsense needs to be knocked on the head. But hey, if you are the constituency MP, you have a lot more weight to throw, and if you are in government, which I'm hoping the people of New Zealand will put New Zealand First in a strong position to be in government, then you can do something.
If you are to be, if you were elected MP, constituent MP, what would you do to support Wairarapa in cleaning up its waterways?
Oh, I think the first thing we've got to do is recognise that actually the problem in the waterways is not here. We've got issues, and for a start, you know, maybe the people who gave Masterton District Council 35-year consent to discharge into the Rimahanga need to be talked to by the people of the Wairarapa. Maybe Carterton, I'm proud to say, in my time we took a lead. This is not what you say you're going to do. This is what you've done. You know, I'm the guy that signed off on the purchase of the Dalefield farm. We paid a premium to get that farm because it's right next door to our wastewater treatment plant. We determined back then that our aspiration was to go from discharging into the Maungatarere to discharging to land, 100%. Now that project's well underway now, and I'm fully confident when it's completed with the wetlands and the irrigation, it will probably win an environmental award. I'm hoping that will be the case, and I'll be very proud of Carterton the day that happens. It's something we all have to look at. But, you know, I'm a bit worried, concerned, that we have people demonising provincial New Zealand, and farmers in particular, because of a purist view, which is not accurate. You know, if you want to look at the waterways that are unhealthy, not even graded as excellent, not even graded as good, go to Auckland. Go onto the Ministry of Education website and look at their gradings. You know, when you look at Canterbury, who's supposedly to be the worst example, where 62% of their rivers are graded as excellent or good, compared to Auckland, which is 0. It makes you wonder what people's aims are. We can all do better, and I would support and promote and encourage farmers who take part particularly in the regional councils and balance environmental awards to continue to do what they're doing. The riparian planting they're doing is paying dividends, running nutrient balance sheets where they minimise, absolutely, and actually it makes sound economic sense if you can minimise the amount of nitrogen you use, if you can minimise the amount of fertiliser you use by running good tight nutrient balance sheets, by frequently testing your soil, by having a solid understanding of your soil structure and the runoff and how it all works, then you will contribute to cleaning up our waterways. But it's not just farmers and towns. I look at it more holistically as an environmental issue. It's not just about water, it's actually about landfill as well. And yet many of the people I hear demonising farmers are the first to roll a wheelie bin out to their front gate, chock a block full of rubbish to go to a landfill. Well, excuse me, if we're going to start pointing the bone, how about we pointed at the chap in the mirror for a start? And my challenge is, people, the day you can get down to one rubbish bag every 4 to 5 months like Christine and I, then you can talk to me about environment, But that's what we do. That's how we play our part. Again, judge me on what I do, not on what I say I'm going to do. And judge all of the candidates on what they actually do, not what they say they're going to do. Now, if you do that, you can't go far wrong. On the waterway issue, all of us need to play a stronger part. Every person who flushes their toilet in Masterton, who uses a washing machine in Masterton, must know the quality of the soap powder they're using and what they put down their toilet. They must. And if they're buying soap powder that is heavy in phosphorus, then they're contributing to the problem. If they're flushing products down the toilets that are heavy in nitrogen, or those things that cannot be extracted in the purification process or the wastewater treatment process, they are contributing to the problem. Every person in urban New Zealand who turns a blind eye to the fact that they are discharging effluent into a river is a part of the problem. We will only resolve this problem for New Zealand, and we all want the same thing, if we work collectively together without damning and condemning one small sector of our community. And if we can do that and not kill our economy and continue to grow our economy and continue to grow jobs, then all of us will be better off, and we'll all feel a damn sight better on our deathbed knowing that our great-grandchildren are actually able to swim in the rivers without any fear of any problems. And by the way, you can swim in most of our rivers in the Wairarapa, and we should be proud of that. We need to bring the focus back to some of those city folk who would actually undermine our economy.
Anything else you'd like to say to wrap up? What would you like to say?
Yeah, I'll just simply say this, that this election, the Wairarapa has a choice. 3 candidates vying to be your representative in Parliament. Of course, I would like people to vote for me or Ron Mark. And why is that? Because I bring a degree of experience, I have, I think it's fair to say, a wide degree of respect across the House, both within Labor and within National. I can get stuff done. I have a track record. Look at my track record. Judge me on that. Give me your constituency vote, the opportunity to represent you and to represent the Wairarapa. Judge me on my performance over the next 3 years. And if at the end of that you think I suck and I haven't done a good job, then I will accept your judgment. Fire me. But you know, I was born here, raised here. I live here. I love this place. I admire and respect the hell out of a lot of people who do some very good work in the community, whether it's REAP, whether it's those good people that Christine works with on the Cancer Society, whether it's the people who run the events, whether it's Kokomai, whether it's Wings Over Wairarapa, whether it's the Golden Shares. I've had 20 years in agribiz. I understand the agricultural, the primary sector, and I know this. You can't do anything unless you can pay for it. And we will not get anywhere as a people, as Wairarapa people, if we don't work together. If we allow people to divide us and conquer, they will conquer us. And I want the same thing as you. I want the Wairarapa to be healthy, happy, and prosperous. Give me a constituency vote on Saturday, 23rd. Give me the job, and I won't let you down. That I assure you.
Awesome. Well done.